Thank you all for coming. Do we have anybody in addition to Nick on the line? Do we still have Nick on the line?
I am still here, sir.
Okay. Okay. As many of you know, we have 3 emeriti in GSL, and our director, Dr. Grogan, talked to all of us a few months ago and said, you know, the senior people know who you are and what you do and so on and so forth, but there's some of our emerging talent that probably has no idea who you are and everything. And would each of you give a seminar? Anything you want to talk about. So in my case, I chose West Point. I'm a graduate. I'm a former faculty member at West Point, and I've spent a good part of my time the last few years trying to increase the interaction between the ERDC and West Point. So that's why I chose this topic. And the subtitle is the nation's first school of engineering. Now I'd like to introduce 2 special visitors we have through the middle of next month. Cadet Kevin Yee, he is a rising junior, and Quinn Gutierrez, a rising sophomore. Both of them are civil engineering majors at West Point, and you'll hear more from them as I go along with the talk. When we picked the talk and the date, I don't think we knew yet exactly when you were coming and so on, but this works out very well. So, what I'm going to cover is, I want to do 3 things. First, I want to say a little bit about the history and heritage of West Point. Some of you know this, some of you may learn something here. Second, I want to talk about what West Point is like today compared to its history and heritage. And then the last part, I want to specifically talk about some collaborations we've had that have worked out well for both institutions. On the right is the Academy crest. And let me point out 3 things on there that will come up again during the presentation. First, the Roman numerals for 1802. Second, the sword, somewhat of a universal symbol for a warrior. And third, the helmet. The helmet is that of Greek goddess Pallas Athene, who is the goddess of wisdom. We'll come back to each of those. So, West Point. West Point is on the Hudson River, which is roughly the eastern boundary of New York State. And back during the Revolution, the Hudson is a major river, as is the Mississippi River here. Strategically, the Hudson River divided the New England colonies from the rest of the original 13 colonies. So it was very important to the colonists to keep control of the Hudson River. West Point is located in a bend in the Hudson River. It's on the west bank. That was very tactically attractive in keeping control of the Hudson River. First, this sharp bend. Back during the Revolution, how did ships get around? What was their source of power? Sail. We didn't even have steam yet, right? So immediately this bend in the river is an impediment to navigation. You know, we got to shift some sails and do everything to try to get around that turn. It's perfect for an obstacle, right guys? Because there's great fields of fire from the high ground on the west of the river to engage anyone who would dare to try to run that bend in the river. And just to make things more interesting for the British, who were then the greatest naval power in the world, we strung a great chain across the river. Situation there is a little bit like Vicksburg during the war between the states, is it not? The Mississippi River divided the western Confederate states from the rest of the Confederacy. The high ground at Vicksburg commanded the river, so very similar. West Point is to the Revolution as Vicksburg, the war between the states. So, we endured the Revolution, and who is the gentleman on the left? Third U.S. President? Thomas Jefferson. As the founding father and author of the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson did not think much of standing armies. The British standing army was a big part of the problem that led to our revolution. And he didn't really want much of it. However, when he becomes the third president and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, he realizes that the country's defense future is really dependent on the foibles of the French. At that time, the two leading world powers were Great Britain and the French. They were slugging it out over in Europe. It was very convenient for the French to give this fledgling United States of America a little assistance to keep a bunch of British forces tied up over here that would otherwise have been on the continent fighting them. And as Jefferson began to think about this more as commander-in-chief, he said, you know, this is maybe not our long-term future. There may come a day where we can't rely on that kind of external assistance, although France continued to remain our ally for a long time. So in 1802, he passed what is called the Military Peace Establishment Act. That date of its signing, 16 March, all graduates acknowledge that every year. We call that Founders Day, and no matter where we are in the world, we try to get together and celebrate that, even in Jackson, Mississippi, which sometimes is only about 10 people. But it established a military academy to be located at West Point. He did something typical of Jeffersonian democracy in establishing the academy, and that was that all cadets going to the academy would be appointed through Congress. This ensured three things. One, this small standing army we were going to have that would be augmented by militia in the time of national emergency would be geographically representative of the entire country. It would be also politically representative of all viewpoints within the country. And third, it would not lead to the establishment of a military caste, where the military was a family business for the major nations on the European continent. That method of congressional appointments has endured to this day. That act of 1802 established the Corps of Engineers. So we have been linked with West Point since its founding and our founding. They both occurred in that same act. And the end result of that is the subtitle of the presentation. West Point thus became the first school of engineering in the United States. So, the first few years, the military academy was kind of finding its legs. There were probably in the first few classes on the order of 10 to 20 graduates. In some cases, maybe even a few less. The curriculum, the program of instruction was kind of informal. The faculty sort of decided when a cadet was ready to graduate and be commissioned. It is nothing like what it is today, which we'll talk about in more detail later. So in 1808, Sylvanus Thayer graduates from West Point. He is considered the father of the military academy. He serves with distinction during the War of 1812. In 1815, the president decides we need to do something better with our military academy. So he assigns then Major Thayer to go to Europe for 2 years and see how the military academies function in Europe. He comes back in 1817, and the president appoints him as the superintendent of the military academy. Does this sound familiar to Vicksburg again? 1927, major flood on the Mississippi River. Lieutenant Vogel, as in the Vogel building, our present headquarters, as in the Vogel Awards for our outstanding talent. Lieutenant Vogel is sent to Europe with the assignment of finding out how Europe does flood control. He comes back, dutifully reports to the chief, this is how they're doing it, and he said, fine, Lieutenant, go to Vicksburg, Mississippi, and build the state-of-the-art, the world's state-of-the-art facility for hydraulics research, which was then called the Waterways Experiment Station, which has grown into what we now call the ERDC. Similar. So, Thayer comes back and he establishes what we call at West Point the Thayer system, or what more broadly, pedagogically is called the Thayer method of education. It's centered on the student learning as opposed to the teacher teaching. Every course, every lesson has objectives. Students are provided the necessary materials. Materials is interesting. We didn't have a printing industry to speak of in 1817 when he came back, so he brought French books back from Europe. Hence, to study engineering, all cadets had to learn French back in those days, because the textbooks were in French. Classes were in small groups. You were periodically resectioned by aptitude, so that the cadets that were having difficulty in mathematics could be given more attention, on the basics. And those cadets who were doing better in French than the rest of the Corps could be extended and could cover the advanced topics they were capable of doing. And there were regular presentations. In the extreme, it was said that every cadet recited in every subject every day. And vestiges of this system of education endure today, do they not? So, during the 19th century, the graduates of West Point acquitted themselves well in all our wars. Outstandingly, during the war between the states, we see here the two commanding generals at the final surrender at Appomattox. General Lee on the right is class of 1829. General Grant on the left is class of 1843. Many of the generals painted in the background are also West Point graduates on both sides. In the 20th century, let me just jump to World War II. Who are these two generals? General Bradley on the right, and on the left, that's General Eisenhower. Both class of 1915, 100 years ago this month, that class graduated. It's known as the class that stars fell on. These two reached 5 stars. Many others reached 4 stars and other ranks. On the left, Eisenhower, originally recruited for football, had a career-ending knee injury early on, and that was the end of his football career, but fortunately not his military career. And of course, his classmate, General Bradley, brilliant career of service during the Second World War. After the war, rose to Chief of Staff of the Army. Graduates also distinguished themselves in fields other than the military. Who is this? Anyone go to the ASCE? I know Chad did the ASCE national meeting, national convention last fall. This is General George Washington Goethals, class of 1880. And construction of the Panama Canal, of which the Culebra Cut on the left was engineering marvel of its time a century ago. But he basically took over what the French couldn't do in Panama and completed it successfully. The French notwithstanding the fact that they had successfully built the Suez Canal. So, by the way, I meant to say at the beginning, if you have questions, ask them anytime. Don't have to wait to the end. Because I've got a couple places in here where I have questions for you. Which two West Point graduates became U.S. presidents?
Grant and Eisenhower.
Grant and Eisenhower, right. Eisenhower, well, we already said Eisenhower 1915, Grant 1843. Okay, West Point today. The aerial photo, again, we can still see the bend in the Hudson River. We can see the high ground commanding the river. The center of all this is what we call the plain. That's where the cadets do drill and ceremonies. The baseball field is also over here. The barracks where the cadets live are in the center left here. The academic buildings are largely along the river here in the foreground, and the physical development center is here in the background. On the right, the cadet dining facility. Actually, this is one wing of the cadet dining facility. There are 6 wings altogether. The student body, or the Corps of Cadets, is 4,200 by act of Congress. But in this dining facility, all the cadets can eat their meals simultaneously at 10-person tables, and they do this in about 30 minutes. It's quite an experience. So the mission, take a second to read that. This is why West Point is there today. The words may be a little different, but that's why it was created in 1802. The words in red, I spent part of my time between 2010 and 2014 at West Point when I wasn't here, and we had 2 superintendents at that time, and every briefing they gave to the faculty began with this mission slide with those words highlighted. That's the first thing he wanted to emphasize to everybody on the staff. We are here to educate, train, and inspire. The goal is a leader of character to be an officer in the Army. So, let's start with the student body, or the Corps of Cadets. On the left, that's the first day the new cadets arrive. It's called Reception Day, or our day for short. It's an amazing experience. These civilians go from civilian early in the morning to early in the evening. They march out as a group coherently and take the oath of office on the plane. So in between, we've got haircuts, we've got all kinds of medical checks, we've got to teach drill and ceremony, we've got to issue basic uniforms. But that's an earlier class going through that exercise on our day, as will be 2 of Vicksburg's young men, Luke Eckstein and Bash Brown, who are entering with the class of 2019 on Monday morning. Some facts about the class, and these are actually the facts for Quinn's class, the class of 2018. There were 15,000 applicants, 4,000 nominated. Most of the nominations come from the congressmen and senators. Of those, 2,200 were qualified for admission and 1,200 admitted. So a competitive process. Academically, there's the SAT average. The group included 82 valedictorians. We're training leaders, so 109 of them were class presidents before they get to West Point. Athletically, 765 team captains and over 1,000 varsity letters. Diversity is important. The officers that lead the Army need to be culturally representative of the soldiers they're leading. And here's where we are. We would like to be better in some of these categories. And of course, the challenge is to increase these numbers without decreasing the numbers ahead of it. The Academy realizes that. We're working on that. We're getting better at that. Another unique thing about the classes today, we have 14 international cadets in Quinn's class, and in this day and age, 17 combat veterans that served in Afghanistan or Iraq were identified for their leadership ability and are now going to West Point to become officers.
So are the international cadets, they're U.S. citizens or not?
No, they're not. Do you remember Chalermpa in the centrifuge a couple years ago? Worked with Holly. He was from Thailand, and he has gone, upon graduation, he went back to the Thai Army, where he serves in the Corps of Engineers now in the Thai Army. So they, by and large, go back to their own countries and serve in their armed forces. They're not U.S. citizens. Got that right? Okay. We only have two that I remember. Okay. So the other group that's important.
Well, this is Lon Pribble.
Hey, Lon.
Hey, I had 4 from Argentina, but then the Falkland Islands happened and they went home.
In the middle. Okay. Okay. Lon is class of
83.
83. Okay. You look younger. I was going to say 86. But Lon is our congressional liaison, right? Is that the right title?
That's correct.
Okay. Glad to have you with us and keep me straight on other things that you remember that I don't. The faculty is...
Think straight. I had to help the Board of Visitors for a few years, and so all this is coming back.
Okay. The other group of... Yes?
I believe the only way you could get a regular Army commission years ago was through West Point. That ROTC and VMI and the other schools were state, or reserve commissions.
Yes.
And RA was West Point.
That's correct. Everyone still gets an RA commission? Yes, okay. Back in the 60s, it was possible but rare to get an RA commission if you were not a West Point graduate.
My grandfather graduated in 1959, went through ROTC, and went straight in as a second lieutenant in the Army.
Okay, as an RA?
I mean, he went into an Army career. I don't know the
Okay.
exact reason, but they shipped him over to Germany, and he was in the Army.
Okay. The other group that's important at the Academy and is kind of interesting and unique is the faculty. I've broken them down into 3 parts. The majority of the faculty are junior military. These are typically captains and majors who have had 10 years military service and have gone back to graduate school for a master's degree. And this is somewhat perplexing to ABET and the other accreditation bodies. Say, how can you possibly be running a quality civil engineering program when over half your faculty only has a master's degree? Well, the key to it is, these officers, when they were out in the field leading platoons or commanding companies, they were graded on how well they were doing that. That was their job. When they come to West Point, their job is to teach and they are graded on how well they teach. And without exception, every accreditation visit has ended completely turning the evaluators around that this is better than a system where the faculty's time is split between research and teaching. It's solely teaching. The next block in the upper right, senior military. These are typically lieutenant colonels or colonels with about 20 years service. They typically served a tour as junior faculty early on, have gone back to graduate school for a PhD in the field, and they stay there for a longer term than the 3-year assignments of the junior faculty. And we also have a civilian component that provides some continuity and some technical depth that accounts for about 1/4 of the faculty. Perhaps, I know some of you have worked with Dr. Conley in the Civil Engineering Department and Professor Bristow. They're both also in the Civil Engineering Department. What is unique on the right is the low student to faculty ratio. The reciprocal is bad. Yeah. That's a typical classroom, and it only seats 17. So that means lots of individual attention. If you studied the lesson and tried hard, you'll get the individual attention you need to get over that difficulty. It also means if you didn't study last night, you're going to get a lot of individual attention. It'll be obvious that you didn't study last night, and that's not a good thing. But it's great. So, the 4-year program. On the left, there's some good advice from Thucydides, a Greek historian who chronicled the Peloponnesian Wars between Athens and Sparta. I see a smile. For that reason, we need a scholar warrior, is what we need, and that's what we're trying to achieve at the Academy. There's an academic, there's a military, and there's a physical component to the program. Well, first, the academic component. There is a core set of courses, 45 of them in all, by my count, that every cadet takes. In the upper left, humanities and social sciences. In the upper right, basic sciences, math and engineering.
Other semesters?
Pardon?
Semesters?
Semester.
Four
No,
semesters of math, or-
that's number of semester courses. Yeah. Yeah. Then underlain by 8 courses in military science and 7 courses of physical education. That's a lot. What this ensures is those that major in the humanities or social sciences, they have an engineering background, which is important because this is a technologically sophisticated army they're going out to lead. So they need that. And conversely, those that are going into a field, math, science, and engineering, to lead in that field also requires these humanities and social sciences. So that's the core curriculum that everyone takes. We have a total of 36 academic majors in engineering, basic sciences, humanities, and social sciences, where you can specialize in one of these areas. If you choose civil engineering, here's what you do beyond that core curriculum. Over on the left are the semesters, 4 through 8. What happened to 1 to 3? In the first 3 semesters, the cadets largely take those core courses, the fundamentals on which these majors are built. In fact, most cadets don't choose their academic major till the fall semester of their sophomore year. So it isn't until the spring semester that they begin taking major-specific courses, and then there's a great deal of them. In the case of civil engineering, in order to meet the accreditation requirements, you got to take 14 courses beyond the 45, which is a lot more than is required for some of the social science and humanities.
So is that, are most of their programs a 4-year or a 4-year program?
4-year program, right?
All of them? All of them?
So here's a typical cadet day. Starting at 6 in the morning. Look at that breakfast formation. In and out in 25 minutes. 4,000 people eating simultaneously. Morning classes, afternoon classes are study time, intramural activities. The sports writer, John Feinstein, wrote a book about football at the service academies. And he said at most colleges with a football program, the football practice is the hardest time of the day. At the service academies, it is often the easiest time of the day compared to everything else that has to be accomplished. Evening study period, taps, and our visitors tell me everyone stays up later than that, typically.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the academic component. The military component. You saw in the core program every semester there's a course in military science, but the bulk of the military training comes in the summertime. Basic field, we'll say a little bit more about each of these cadet training. There's also the opportunity for what's called military specialty training, and the training up here in the first 4 bullets is actually given by the upper class cadets to the rest of the Corps. So basic training. This is what our Vicksburg new, they're not even called cadets yet when they start out that first summer. They're called new cadets. And so we accomplish 2 things in general. One, we teach them the things they need to be part of the Corps of Cadets. The heritage and tradition, just how things are done, what procedure are followed. How many of you had prior military service? A lot of standing around and waiting. This is called the Book of Knowledge, as the new cadets are standing around and waiting to get issued a particular uniform or a particular book or get a particular shot or some other medical exam. They are not standing there talking to their neighbor, not looking around bored. They are learning what they're supposed to be learning in that book of knowledge. No time wasted. In addition to that, at the end of that first summer, the new cadets basically acquire the skills that all our soldiers do upon entry into the Army. So the basics of drill and ceremonies as shown on the right. So, cadet field training and cadet leader development training. It turns out our cadets have just done this earlier this month. Quinn, tell us about field training.
So I just completed cadet field training. It happens between your freshman and sophomore year, or plebe and yearling year. And it's basically a sampling of all the different branches that you have the opportunity to go into. So we got to do things like field artillery, got to shoot some howitzers, spend some time in some helicopters, get to taste of aviation, lots of land navigation, and it ended with a 7-mile run back to West Point. So you get a lot of tastes of how the real Army is, and it's just a way to get yourself more acquainted with the world outside of West Point.
Kevin?
So I just finished up leadership development training, and that's usually done between your either your junior year or your senior year. And what you do during that time period is you learn about basic mission. So you learn how to accomplish ambushes, tactical tasks, whatever stuff the military needs you to do. And what happens is that every 12 hours your leadership position is flipped, so that kind of adds to the chaos of like the whole battle arena. And during that time, you lead your peers into missions, and it's a great training. Yeah.
So who are the two civilians in the photo on the right?
Oh, yeah. So that's one of the missions where you go into a either a friendly or a enemy village, and you do key leader engagement. So you talk to the town leaders, and that's what they're doing right now. And they're speaking different languages, so you need a translator, and you need to figure out what the village needs and try to negotiate tasks with them. So that's one of the missions.
Okay, thanks guys. Another opportunity or another training they do is cadet troop leader training. They basically go to a unit and are given a lieutenant's job to do under the close supervision and tutelage of a lieutenant in the unit. I sort of describe this as it's analogous to practice teaching, where at the end of the program the teacher goes out and actually takes on a class for a semester or part of a semester. I remember doing this, and I remember my lieutenant mentor saying, don't be afraid to try things. When you get out to the unit and you try something and it goes bad, you're in the unit, whatever you did is going to be with you forever. So I tried a lot of things, got a lot of them wrong, and that's a very good thing that I wasn't with that unit ever again. Skill training. By this we mean things such as air assault training on the left, how to, the technical details of operating helicopters and lift equipment and so on. On the right is sapper training, which our engineer soldiers obtain, and so that's a very good one for an officer, a cadet who's bound to be an officer in the Corps of Engineers. So the third part of it is physical development. And that is a famous quote from General MacArthur on the left. So these seeds are obtained in one of three ways, or a combination of the three, shown on the right. Army fields 27 NCAA teams. Football on the left, most popular. On the right, does anyone recognize that Army basketball player? Class of 2011, she captained the basketball team in 2010 and 2011. Anyone from structural engineering branch? Okay. She is Erin Anthony, and she spent the summer of 2010 here on an assignment similar to our two cadets today. I last saw Erin in 2012. She was at West Point for a football game and a wedding. I don't know how she was doing both because it was noon already. In any case, she was at that time stationed at Fort Bragg. She was the platoon leader of the route clearing platoon, and her unit was about to be deployed to Afghanistan. She's probably Captain Anthony by now with 4 years of service. There we go. Club sports. We have 16 of those. Marathon on the left, cycling on the right. And intramural sports. Soccer, 11 of them altogether, soccer on the left, swimming on the right. These are not pickup games between one barracks and another. These are formally organized by the Department of Physical Education. Just to show you how formal, there are actual intramural pool records for swimming. And one of those records is held by Vicksburg's Matt Schoenberger, son of Jim and Tariq. And Matt just graduated last month, the class of 2015. He is commissioned in the Armor and will be, eventually his first assignment will be at Fort Hood, Texas. So, another question. 3 Army football players have won the Heisman.
Glenn Davis, Doc Blanchard, and I don't know the third one.
Class of 59, like your grandfather.
I didn't know.
Pete Dawkins. Pete Dawkins. The first 2, Mr. Inside, Mr. Outside, back when Army was a national champion. Pete Dawkins, an interesting, he was first captain, near first in his class, football star, obviously, went on to be a brigadier general. So, collaboration with the ERDC. What we've been trying to achieve over the last few years, and it's been going on since 1802 because we were created by the same act of Congress, but we've tried to emphasize this in the last few years, is involving the cadets and faculty at West Point in our research to the benefit of our research. And conversely, we've tried to involve our staff here in the engineering programs at West Point to provide a margin of excellence for those programs. So, here's an example. Now I know Bill's going to say 1978, Paul, this should have been back in the history and heritage portion of the discussion. But that is Cadet Steve Ressler in the summer of 1978. He's looking at some test equipment in our soil dynamics laboratory. His Jed Burroughs at that time was me here, decked out in 70s regalia, just out of the Army myself, so I missed the 60s, so we tried to catch up on that. But he did a project in his summer assignment that dealt with a tubular sandbag. So if you can imagine a sandbag that's a cylinder, and it's maybe about 6 to 8 feet long. And you take this sandbag, instead of just laying it flat, you put it in an arch shape. Okay? And so instead of building a structure to carry the load of the sandbag carries its own load and also provides protection against fragmentation and blast. And he studied the moment thrust interaction, sort of like getting the moment thrust interaction diagram for a concrete section, but it was actually good enough that we published this as a technical report. So let's move along until about 2005. Bob Welch in Information Technology Laboratory is doing some high-performance computations of carbon nanotubes. And he notices that there is a compressive force in the nanotubes that adds to its load carrying capacity. I said, wow, that's the same thing we noticed back here in 1978. So some of these studies, like our 2 visitors are here for this month, really do help us, really do help us. Incidentally, Cadet Ressler went on to be commissioned in the Corps of Engineers. He headed the Department of Civil and Mechanical Engineering up until 2013, at which time he retired as a Major General. So, on the one hand, we'd like to say, gee, it's all because of that summer he spent with us. but I think he achieved greatness in spite of anything I might have helped him with. Here's a more recent one. 2010, we had several cadets that summer, and collectively they were looking at IED defeat where the IED was placed in a culvert. Aaron Anthony and a couple of others, they looked at what we do in the culvert itself, either to keep the device out or if it goes off in the culvert, how can we harden it so that the effect on a passing vehicle is less. Lars took a step back even further of that. A lot of these culverts in Afghanistan, probably they didn't need to be there. You know, we don't go out and do a detailed stateside hydrologic assessment. So Lars focused on rapid and approximate analysis using web-based data and tools. And he came up with some good information. Of course, this is being done when you apply this to a specific culvert in a specific province. That's classified, and most of his work was done in that environment. However, the method itself is unclassified, and it has application to say if you're putting a road in somewhere that you don't have direct access to. This same technique is valuable for that. So this led to a publication in an ASE journal that was jointly authored by the time it was published, he was Lieutenant Griffith, Professor Bristow, a civilian faculty member at West Point, and Mark Jordan from our Coastal and Hydraulics Laboratory, who mentored Lars while he was here for a summer assignment. Another example here, MICA, Mobile Information Collection Application, and this is a year later in 2011. This is led by Robert Walker, formerly of the Pavements branch here in GSL, but at this time he has moved on to Information Technology Laboratory. And in 2011, of course, we had a flood of record on the Mississippi River. But he came up with an application here to quickly collect and display in a common picture of the situation along the Mississippi River using smartphone technology and apps written specifically for the smartphone. Kevin Scruggs at that time was a cadet who came here for the summer. His project was to take that same technology and apply it to engineer route reconnaissance. This led to a publication in another American Society of Civil Engineering journal. And presently, First Lieutenant Scruggs is with the Stryker Brigade in Alaska. He will be coming to Fort Polk for pre-deployment training in January, but he's actually introducing this route reconnaissance tool into his unit compared to the way it's traditionally done by hand. So, courage, first I salute the people that have taken the time to mentor a cadet in a project like this, as Jeff Burrows is doing with our two visitors today. I encourage you to give some thought to it. Yes, it requires a little extra effort to think it through of exactly what they're going to do and how it can be productive, but it can pay off for us, as we've seen here in these three examples, and there are many more. So with that, gentlemen, what are you doing here this summer?
So we came here with a couple of projects that Jet had for us to work on. The first of them is we're optimizing the mixing order for this ultra-high performance concrete that they develop here. And so we've been mixing lots of batches of concrete and testing them to see how fast we can actually make this concrete and seeing if there is any effect on the mixing order.
And the second one that we're working on, or will be working on starting today, hopefully, is replacing cement and silica flour with limestone. See what kind of percent, like how much we can replace it by, and still hold the strength, compressive strength, and whatever else that we need. So.
which can have a pretty big environmental and health impact on the concrete erosion.
Okay, thanks, guys. So, here's a list on the left of some of us who have gone to West Point to add that margin of excellence. Even Dr. Pittman managed to get up there last spring. But it's an exciting experience, and it is really valued by the Academy. In many cases, it's possible to do this as sort of an add-on to a trip. Jim O'Daniel here was actually in New York to visit RPI about some joint research he was doing there, so it was very easy to take an extra day and come down to West Point, talk to the advanced structural analysis class, and get treated to dinner in that fine dining facility where you get to finish your meal along with 4,000 others in 25 minutes or less. Okay. So I encourage all of you to think about that as well. And well, let's conclude. This is the class of 2015, graduating last month. You guys are somewhere in that white mass in the upper deck, broiling in the sun. Any general questions, or any questions?
Just to highlight the two cadets, you're going to go branch engineering, right? Corps of Engineers.
I'm planning on it.
I'm planning on going infantry. I'm planning on going infantry.
Oh, okay.
So maybe one day I'll branch detail out to Corps of Engineers, but for now.
Lon, did I get it right?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting how almost nothing has changed. So I do want to say that General Trainer is my classmate. He's the dean right now. So you probably know him better than I do, Paul. But it's amazing how, when you're a cadet, generals are old.
Not anymore.
But they're not anymore. The other thing is, and this is not for the whole audience, but you can hear it anyways. Paul, any advice you can give to me on our current effort to create or duplicate the relationship we have with West Point with the Coast Guard Academy?
Okay.
If you could call me and educate me, and Mr. Sanchez at CHL is kind of geared up to work with us, and I got some contacts there, but making it a success. And I think they're skeptical right now, but I think it would be good for both the Coast Guard and for the ERDC to have a similar relationship.
Yeah. I've got an idea. I'll call you after this. Yeah. Nick, you still with us?
Yes, sir. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Okay. Any questions?
I've been fortunate to participate in a few cadet projects in the past, and all I'll add is that they are very worthwhile and they are extremely high caliber individuals. So I also encourage anyone to take advantage of that.
Anybody else join us remotely here? Any other questions here? Okay. Well, think about what you can do here, okay, to increase this interaction. Also think about other promising young talent in our community. I know, you are active throughout the community, but are there other young men and women like Luke and Batch that would really thrive in this opportunity? And we should certainly encourage them. Yes?
How do we get cadets and do we pay them? Like with our research money?
Okay. Their salaries are paid. So all we have to do is pay for their travel to get here and their TDY while they're here. It's kind of informal. I sort of try to keep track of what's going on, but so I guess one way is just I'm in the directory. Talk to me with your idea. I'll be glad to pursue it. And yeah, so there's summer assignments. Cadets also have the opportunity in their major field of study to take an elective course that is called individual study. So those 2 projects that started as summer assignments that turned into published papers, the cadet continued that work as an individual study elective. And the good thing about that is you get not only the cadet, but you get his faculty advisor working on that problem as well. And the costs, if there's any direct costs, the salaries are paid both for the faculty and the cadets. What might be a direct cost? Well, if there's some particular piece of equipment, if there's some particular material we've got to acquire to do the experiments or whatever, we would pay that. So think about that. Yes.
So just with the cadets, what would you do if you weren't here? And then what made Vicksburg an attractive option for doing something?
So for me, I actually have a pretty busy summer. So right after this, I go to airborne school at Fort Benning, Georgia. But if I wasn't here, I'd probably be either at home or I guess doing something similar with the Corps of Engineers. I guess what attracted me here was the relationship with Dr. Conley back at West Point. He does a lot of research with concrete, and he's an incredible person to work with.
Yes, if I wasn't here, I'll probably be doing a cadre leadership training. So I'll be, so the class of 2019 coming in, I'll probably be one of their squad leaders or something like that. And right after this, I'm shadowing a captain in the Army. He's in the Corps of Engineers, so I'll be shadowing him in South Korea.
So, hope you learned something, and enjoy talking with you.